You know what most people miss when they're trying to figure out why someone keeps coming back into their life? It's not always about attraction. It's not always about chemistry. It's not even about sex. Those things might bring someone to you in the beginning, but they're not what brings them back after distance, silence, or mistakes. The real reason, and it's more subtle than people realize, is emotional safety. Think about it. In a world where everyone's performing, pretending, constantly trying to impress or protect themselves from being hurt, emotional safety becomes this rare, almost sacred space. And when someone experiences that with you, it sticks. Even if they couldn't put it into words at the time. What does emotional safety actually look like? It's not about coddling someone. It's not about tolerating bad behavior or avoiding conflict. It's when a person feels like they can breathe around you. They're not being judged. They're not being manipulated. They don't feel like they have to earn your affection by playing a role. You were a place where they could be flawed, confused, ambitious, scared, and still be seen, still be accepted. When you were with him, you weren't constantly trying to impress. You weren't filtering your personality just to fit into some mold of what you thought he wanted. You were just real, and in that realness, he found a version of himself he liked more. That's powerful, because when someone starts to associate you with the best parts of themselves, their vulnerability, their openness, their humor, their peace, they don't forget that. Even if they walk away, even if they're confused, even if they're not ready for the kind of depth you were offering, it haunts them in the best way. Because when they go out there, chasing distractions, entertaining attention, running from their own discomfort, they start noticing something. Everything else feels a little performative, a little transactional. It's surface level, fun maybe, but not safe, not real. And that's when they remember, you weren't chaos, you were calm, you weren't demanding, you were consistent. You didn't feed their ego, you saw their heart. They might have needed time to figure out what that meant. Maybe they didn't even know how to receive that kind of presence when they had it. Sometimes people aren't healed enough to recognize the thing that's actually good for them. And in that moment they pull away, thinking they're chasing freedom when they're actually running from the very thing that could have changed them. But after a while, after enough noise, after enough almost and shallow connections, after enough nights that felt full but left them empty, the memory of you hits different. It softens them. It makes them wonder, did I mess that up? And let's be clear, that doesn't mean you were perfect. It means you were authentic, and authenticity is terrifying to someone who isn't ready to be real with themselves. But once they grow, once they reflect, once they start waking up to what actually matters, they start seeing what they had in you. So yes, sometimes he comes back because he misses your energy, but more than that, he misses how he felt about himself when he was around you. The calm, the connection, the quiet confidence, the peace that came from not needing to prove anything. And here's the part I need you to understand. This isn't a sign that you should automatically open the door. This isn't about waiting around for that knock. It's about recognizing that what you brought to the table, your warmth, your emotional maturity, your grounded presence wasn't just nice, it was rare. So even if he comes back and you choose not to answer or you've already outgrown him, you can still hold your head high, knowing that what you gave wasn't lost, it was felt deeply. You became unforgettable, not because you tried to be, but because you gave him something the world rarely does. A feeling of being truly seen, without having to perform for it. And that is why he comes back. There's this moment, and it's subtle, where everything shifts. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. You don't post some big declaration on social media. You just stop. You stop chasing. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes hoping for his name to pop up. You stop trying to decode every short reply. Stop bending your boundaries. Stop shrinking yourself to keep him interested. And he feels it. People think the loud exits are what makes someone come back. The ones where you make a scene, scream your worth, say you'll regret losing me. But it's not that. The real shift is quiet. It's when your energy changes, when you no longer revolve around him, when your world stops orbiting his validation. That's when his world starts to feel the difference. Because up until that moment, he felt your presence everywhere. You were the one who cared, you were consistent, you reached out first, you made plans, you forgave quickly. You tried to understand, to explain, to fight for something. And on some level, he counted on that. Whether he admitted it or not, he got used to the idea that no matter how far he pulled away, you'd still be there when he came back. He didn't see your effort as effort. He saw it as normal, predictable, always available. And when something becomes predictable, it starts to lose its urgency. It gets taken for granted, not because you weren't valuable, but because you were always there. But then you stop, you take your hands off the wheel, and for the first time, there's silence where there used to be certainty. He's left wondering, did she give up? Is she over me? And now he's the one refreshing the messages, noticing the space, feeling the absence. Because when someone pulls away and still gets chased, they never have to feel the consequences of their distance. But when they pull away and you let them, it changes the entire dynamic. It forces them to sit with their own discomfort. And here's what's important. You didn't stop because you were playing a game. You stopped because it was costing you too much to keep pouring into someone who wasn't meeting you halfway. You stop because chasing someone who's unsure makes you forget your own worth. You stop because you finally realized you don't need to convince someone to choose you. And that kind of self-respect, it's powerful. See, we think people value what we give, but often they don't value it until it's gone. They don't value the good morning texts, the support, the softness, the effort, until there's a gap where all of that used to be. When you stop chasing, you hold up a mirror. You show someone who they really are, without the comfort of your effort, compensating for their inconsistency. And that can be uncomfortable for them. It disrupts the pattern. It confronts them with the reality that you were never the one who needed proving. They were. Now they're the one sitting in uncertainty. They're the one wondering what you're doing. If you've moved on, who's getting your attention now? And not because you posted a thirst trap or played mind games, but because you genuinely shifted your energy back to yourself. And here's the thing, the moment you stop chasing is also the moment you start healing. You begin reconnecting with the parts of you that got lost in the pursuit. Your hobbies feel interesting again. Your peace returns. You stop negotiating your standards. You remember that love isn't supposed to feel like a battle you have to keep losing to win. That energy, that reclaiming of yourself, it's magnetic. It draws people in, not because you're trying to, but because you're radiating from a place of confidence and clarity. And now if he comes back, it's not because you pulled him in with effort. It's because your absence made him realize what your presence was really worth. That's the power of stopping the chase. It doesn't just shift the relationship, it restores you. And it reminds them that you were never holding on because you needed them. You were holding on because you cared. But the second you care more about your peace than their potential, everything changes. And that is why he comes back. Something powerful happens when you stop waiting for someone to become who you hoped they'd be, and you start becoming you, fully, boldly, without permission, without apology. That kind of shift, that internal decision to stop obsessing over what someone else is doing and redirect that energy into your own growth, it changes everything. See, when you're stuck in a space of longing, when you're constantly looking backward or sideways, or checking in to see if they're paying attention, you're not really in your life. You're in limbo, and it's exhausting. You start to shrink. You stop showing up for your goals the same way. You hesitate to evolve too far, in case they come back and don't recognize you anymore. It's like part of you is putting your own growth on pause, just in case. But the moment you let go, truly let go, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, everything opens up. You remember who you are. You reconnect with what makes you feel alive. You step back into your ambition, your hobbies, your friendships, the things that fill you up. And you stop looking over your shoulder to see if they noticed, because you're too busy becoming someone you can be proud of. And here's where it gets interesting. That's when he starts to notice. Not when you're trying to get his attention, not when you're crafting the perfect post, or carefully curating your silence to make him wonder. He notices when you stop being in reaction to him at all, when you're no longer orbiting his universe, when you're simply gone from that storyline and writing a new one. Because people don't always notice the slow fade. They don't always realize when your energy starts to shift, but they do notice when they no longer recognize you. Not because you've changed to spite them, but because you've changed in spite of them. They come back, not to who you were, but to try and meet who you've become. And for the first time, they're not sure if there's still enough. That's the irony. While they were out there playing it safe, staying the same, avoiding depth, avoiding growth, avoiding commitment, you evolved, you got stronger, you got clearer. You stopped living in potential and started living in the present. And that growth, it's confronting. He remembers you as someone who wanted him, needed him, maybe even waited on him. Now he sees someone who doesn't, someone who's moved on, not just physically, but emotionally. And that's a very different kind of loss. It's not about being replaced, it's about being outgrown. There's a version of you that he was comfortable with, the one who gave too much, forgave too easily, put him on a pedestal while putting yourself second. That version made him feel safe, because it asked for so little. But now, you've raised your standards, you've remembered your value, and you're no longer accessible in the way you were before. And let me be clear, this isn't about becoming colder or harsher. This is about becoming wiser, more self-aware, more intentional with your time and energy. It's about choosing yourself over a connection that kept you stuck. And that kind of glow, it's impossible to ignore. When he sees it, maybe in a photo, maybe in person, maybe just in the way people talk about you, he feels it, that quiet, internal shift. That moment of, damn, I didn't think she'd actually move on. That's not regret over losing you. That's regret over not growing with you. Because he knows now, catching up won't be easy. You're no longer waiting for him to figure it out. You're not dropping breadcrumbs, hoping he'll follow the trail. You've walked into a new chapter without looking back, and he's left flipping through an old one, hoping there's still space for him in the story. But you've changed, and not in a way that erases who you were, but in a way that elevates it. You became the kind of woman who doesn't just hope for love, she chooses it, she creates it, she becomes it. And that is why he comes back. There's something incredibly disarming about quiet strength. It's not loud, it doesn't yell, beg, or chase. It just is. And for a man who thought he could come and go as he pleased, who thought he had time, who thought you'd always be there, that strength is a wake-up call. When you finally walked away, you didn't do it to get a reaction. You didn't slam the door. You didn't send a final message, hoping he'd see the light. You just reached that moment inside yourself where you realized, I can't keep doing this to me. That decision, that moment where you put your own peace above the possibility of maybe someday, was the most powerful thing you could have done. Because up until then, he had control. Not in a malicious way, necessarily, but in the sense that he knew he could give just enough to keep you there. He'd disappear, come back, test the waters, see if your heart still opened like it used to. And for a while it did. For a while you made excuses. For a while you clung to potential, to hope, to what it could be if he would just step up. But then came the shift, that moment where something in you broke, not from weakness, but from clarity. You saw the pattern. You saw how much you were showing up for someone who only met you halfway when it was convenient. And instead of trying to fix it again, you let go. That's the kind of strength that people don't expect. Because we've been conditioned to believe that strength is aggressive, confrontational. But real strength is graceful. It's walking away from someone you love, because you finally love yourself more. It's knowing that staying would mean sacrificing your standards, your time, your peace, and refusing to do that anymore. He didn't see that coming, because he was used to access, used to your softness, used to your forgiveness. He thought your heart was his home base, that no matter what, he could always come back, knock on that door, and you'd answer with open arms. But this time you didn't. You kept the door shut, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And that silence, that boundary, that absence of drama, it hit different. Because people expect anger, they expect tears, they expect arguments. But when you walk away in calm, when you don't need to prove anything, when you stop needing them to understand why, it creates a void. A silence that speaks volumes. A space where they're left alone with the truth of their actions, without the distraction of your reaction. That's what shook him. Not the fact that you left, but the way you left, with dignity, with grace, with no attempt to guilt him or convince him that he made a mistake. You simply chose yourself, and in doing that you broke the cycle. He started to feel it when he reached for his phone and realized there were no new messages. When he thought about you and realized you weren't waiting on the other side of that thought anymore. When he looked at his life and noticed that the space you once filled, emotionally, energetically, wasn't filled by anyone else. Not because you're irreplaceable in some grand romanticized way, but because what you gave came from a place of genuine love. A love that was patient, kind, giving, until it wasn't. And now he's replaying things, reconsidering, rewriting conversations in his head, wondering how he didn't see it slipping away, wondering how he let someone with that kind of heart go. But here's the truth. He didn't lose you when you left. He lost you the moment he took your consistency for granted. The moment he assumed you'd always be there. The moment he forgot that even the most loyal heart has a breaking point. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally started caring enough about yourself. That strength, that quiet refusal to settle for crumbs, that decision to stop fighting for someone who didn't fight for you. It's what shifted the story. And now, if he comes back, it's not because he suddenly became someone new overnight. It's because your absence made him confront the one thing he never had to deal with before. You moving on, without needing to be saved. He saw strength where he used to see softness. And it reminded him that you weren't weak for staying. You were strong for finally leaving. And that is why he comes back. There's a moment and you don't always notice it at first. When he realizes something's different about you. Not on the surface. Not your clothes. Not your hair. Not your social media. It's deeper than that. It's in your energy. In the way you carry yourself. In how you speak. There's a shift, a kind of peace that doesn't need validation. A quiet confidence that says, I know who I am now. And that's the part that gets to him. Because he remembers you before this version. He remembers the version of you that was unsure, that second-guessed, that gave him the benefit of the doubt, even when he hadn't earned it. He remembers the version of you who loved with everything you had, even if you didn't always get it back. The you that waited, that held space, that hoped. But now, he sees someone who's no longer hoping, not in a bitter way, in a liberated way. You've stopped romanticizing what could be, and started living fully in what is. You've built something outside of him, a life that doesn't leave space for someone who doesn't show up with real intention. And maybe he's not used to that. Maybe he's used to people who orbit him, who chase a response, who crack under mixed signals. But you don't anymore, because somewhere along the line, you stopped tying your value to whether or not someone chooses you. You stopped making his attention the measure of your worth. You chose you. That's what he didn't see coming. He thought you'd glow up just enough to get his attention back. What he didn't expect was that you'd glow up so much, his attention would stop mattering. And that kind of transformation, that's not external. It's not the new outfit or the gym or the trip you took with your friends. That transformation comes from healing. From the nights you sat with your pain and didn't numb it. From the moments you wanted to call him and didn't. From the hard decision to let go of someone who couldn't meet you where you were going. You became someone who doesn't chase love. You attract it. Through your standards, your energy, your boundaries, through how you love yourself in the way you once loved him. And now he feels the weight of that, because he sees you, truly sees you, maybe for the first time. Not just the beauty or the kindness, or the memories you shared. He sees your growth, your presence, your power. He doesn't know how to approach it anymore. He used to know exactly what to say, what move to make, how to get back in. But now that old script doesn't work. Because you've outgrown it. You've outgrown him. And that's not a jab. It's just the truth. You've stepped into a version of yourself that's no longer compatible with the game he used to play. And maybe now he's inspired. Maybe now he's regretting. Maybe he's even wondering if it's too late. But the irony is, it was never about him being perfect. You never needed him to have it all figured out. You just needed him to try, to be consistent, to be honest. And he didn't. But you kept growing anyway. You didn't wait for an apology. You didn't pause your healing. You didn't sit still hoping he'd finally see your worth. You became the kind of woman who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. She knows she is. And when a man sees that kind of change, it rattles him. Because now you're no longer accessible in the way he remembers. You're not seeking closure. You're not trying to make sense of his silence. You've made peace with the fact that love should never require you to abandon yourself. That's why he comes back. Not just because he misses you, but because he sees what you've become, and now he wants to stand next to that. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because he finally understands what he lost. But whether you let him or not, that's your power, now, and that is why he comes back.